I'm Alex Rude. I'm from the Wild Labs team, and I'm going to be your host today for October Variety Hour. We have some great events, or sorry, we have some great speakers lined up today, including speed talks from Parker DePond, Carolina Ugarte, and Lindsey Higgins, and a long talk from Pen Shing. So to kick us off, I'm going to hand it over to Parker, who's going to be sharing some ideas about vein scanning for autonomous mammal detection. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Parker, whenever you're ready, it's all yours.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. My name is Parker DePond, and I would just want to give a little bit of background about myself before I dive into my short little presentation. Uh, I graduated from Iowa State University in 2023 with a degree in animal ecology and have been hopping around from seasonal jobs and seasonal research positions ever since. Um, and when I was at my undergrad at Iowa State University, I started developing this hypothesis of using NIR spectrometry for autonomous wildlife traps, and have ever since been developing it in my own free time. And I'm hoping to take the idea and expand it in grad school coming up next year. But I wanted to also give a little bit of background about the technology itself. So breaking down NIR spectrometry, NIR stands for near infrared light. There is no clear definition on the wavelengths that is. Everyone has their own definition. The region that we're going to be talking about is what's shown there. And spectrometry is just the interaction between light and matter. So putting that all together, my project is using near infrared light to look at specifically vein patterns. And there's essentially two reasons why you would do this. The first of which being you need to give somebody an IV. You can use near infrared light to view the vein patterns and then project it as shown here. And then the other reason is for biometric security. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today, is using near infrared spectrometry for individual identification. There are two regions of the body this is commonly done, at least in humans, and that is palms and in a retina scan, both looking at the venous patterns, just depending on where in the body. And they essentially work the exact same way. You're looking at the vein patterns, and through that, you're able to get a unique identification. It works essentially just like a fingerprint. You're able to get a unique identifier that way. And I am interested in exploring if this technology can be used in wildlife research and wildlife studies. The way that you get a unique identifier through a vein pattern is using a convolutional neural network, a CNN, if you're familiar with those. They've been more popularized recently as it is the backbone essentially of modern artificial intelligence. But what CNNs, convolutional neural networks, are really good at is pattern identification, which is very, very useful if you have a large data set of potentially hundreds of thousands of individuals and you need to get a unique identifier that way. Yes, so in the interest of time, move on to my proposed research, which is broken down into four parts, essentially. The feasibility of it. There haven't been any research or studies done essentially using this technology across different species or multiple taxa. And so the first question I need to ask is, can you get a sufficiently reliable detection across multiple taxas and species? And are those stable enough across long time frames from months to years? Can you repeatedly identify the same individual? If that's proven to be true, I'll move on to the methodology behind the practice. What's the best method to get of vein identification? How does hair affect it? Hair density, body location, the sensor type, LEDs, so on and so forth to get the most reliable results. If I can do both of those things, how practical is this really? Is it going to be cheap? Is it going to be reliable? And is it going to work in the field? And finally, the implementation, which is like the big overarching picture, is taking this technology and instead of using it handheld while you have an individual in a trap, can it be used autonomously to detect individuals? Yeah, I think I'm just about at my time. And so I want to open up the floor to any questions that you have for me about it. as well as I want to present some questions to you of, does the community at large think that this is useful or practical? And would you use this in your own research? So thank you so much for your time today.
I'll let other people, I'll give it a moment to let anybody else chime in, because I have a question, but I don't want to step on anyone's toes. Feel free, if you don't have access to a mic, to put it in the chat and we'll call it out. But I might go ahead and ask my question anyway. Like, what types of people do you think are you looking to like discuss any of like the feasibility of this with? Is it like biologists, like ecologists, like field researchers, all the above? Because I feel like some of those questions, the granularity of the questions posed is like are sort of on different scales and in different sort of like specific like specialty areas. Or is it just everybody? You're open to it all.
Yeah, definitely open to it all. I have been able to get a few different professors at different universities. I got a engineering professor at University of Boulder who was interested in it. And he has also been working on autonomizing a leg trap essentially, and thinks that this technology could be useful. I think it's early stages of implementation. It's mostly going to be useful for endangered species where you really don't want to tag them in any way. If you're worried about sedating them to put a pit tag in, or you're worried about the effects that any sort of tattooing or tagging will have on the individual, I think that's where it will really be useful. And then larger scale, yeah, using it in an autonomous mammal trap. Yeah, it's really interdisciplinary. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's difficult that I've been finding an advisor interested in it. But yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm here today. Hopefully somebody will have some suggestions and answers.
Well, it looks like Kalindi in the chat said that she thinks she knows somebody who's using vein patterns for bat identification. So I don't know if you're aware about of that research or anything, but maybe you guys can connect and figure out if there's something going on there. 'Cause that could be cool.
Yeah, I am not aware, but I'm interested.
You're about to get aware, and that's the beauty of Variety Hour. Um, we're just at time. If anybody has any more questions or thoughts for Parker or ideas or leads or anything, please feel free to put them in the chat. Thank you so much again, Parker, for that. I'm super excited to see what comes out of this, hopefully.
Thank you.
Next up for our second speed talk is Carolina Ugarte, and she is going to be telling us about some research that she did testing acoustic cues to deter farming conflict in Chile. So Carolina, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Perfect. Well, hi everyone. My name is Carolina, and I'll talk to you about a part of my PhD thesis and also a conservation project that it's about testing acoustic risk cues to deter small carnivores from approaching poultry in southern Chile, where poultry-carnivore conflicts will occur. Well, this project is being conducted in southern Chile, in South America, in the Los Lagos regions here, specifically in a rural area characterized as the buffer zone of three national parks. So poultry farmers live in a close connection with native forest, as you can see in this picture. And in this area, also small carnivores inhabit, carnivores as the guiña, which is the smallest wildcat in the continent. The Tilla fox, a South American fox, and also the lesser grison, that it's a South American mustelid. And all of them are involved in conflict because of poultry predation. So to test these acoustic risk cues, we performed a behavioral study with an automated behavioral system produced by us that is this speaker that connects to the camera trap, and when the motion sensor is triggered, the speaker also activates. So we conducted a 4 weeks experiment in 2 seasons, summer and winter, compounded by 30 experimental sites represented in these orange spots. And 15 of them were inside farms with poultry, and 15 were in places without poultry. In this picture, you can see one experimental site. Here is the speaker connected to the camera trap. There was also available food, chicken, and there was also a small jar with tuna for the smell. So when an animal appear, the activates right the camera motion sensor, and a 20-second video is recorded, and the first 3 seconds are silent, followed by 10 seconds of a random sound that could be human voices, dog barks, or local birds called as a control. Then 7 more seconds in silence. So well, we also collected information about the site vegetation and other landscape characteristics. So our first results from a GLMM analyzing scape behaviors, uh, we observed a significant increase in the probability of the scape when human or dog sounds are played compared by the control. However, we did not find significant differences between farm sites with or without poultry presence. Additionally, we found that the escape probability tends to increase with the number of houses, with also the of houses surrounding these sites in a 500 kilometers buffer. It also increased with less horizontal vegetation and with more vertical vegetation. So we know that it's also important to address the ecological aspects that influence the carnivore's behavior and not just the sound. Based on these results, we aim to apply this as a low-cost management techniques as a carnivore deterrent. And also this application, we want to do it in partnership with poultry farmers and with governmental service. And we already have many interested participants to try this as a management technique. So to achieve this, we need to develop this acoustic device, right? Initially, and based on literature that maybe some of you know, and also the WILDLABS boombox technology that I suppose some of you know, we developed these simple devices and connected to the camera traps. Then we did field work, and after that we made some improvements, such as adding this battery tester and also put everything in the same board. We also increased the size of the box. So now what we want to do is to make this device more user-friendly and practical. So first, of course, we need to remove the camera trap, and we need to add one or more sensors to the speakers, doing something like this. That's like our idea. So what we want to do is to build a low-cost, plug-and-play, and easy to handle and accessible, even for all the farmers, because we want this device to be used by farmers. So first, we need to add at least one sensor, right? And also narrow the sensor detection range to better detect the carnivore. So that's what we want to do now. So we are very happy and welcome if you have any ideas, comment, or suggestion to do this. And thank you very much. I'll be very happy to hear your feedback. Here's my email and my Instagrams in case you want to contact me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That is awesome. Feel free if anybody else has questions for Carolina, please put them in the chat. I have some questions more about like people's like are farmers excited about this like technology being developed, and are they like excited to use it?
Yes, totally. I mean, well, we already did this experiment, and they like everyone wants to be part of the experiment, and we only needed 15, So it was like, yes, I don't know. I asked to a woman, hey, can we do this in your farm? And they were like, yes. And I have 3 friends that also want it, and also sometimes people connect me from other parts of Chile that they want to use it. So I think it really might be like a very good management technique, because it has a good, like, people really accept it, and they say like, oh, of course it's going to work, because I don't know, foxes are scared of dogs, so yes.
Thanks. I see that we have 2 people with their hands up, but we are just over time for this second slot. So Marconi and Eliana, if you want to put your questions in the chat, and I will have Carolina answer them there. love seeing these questions roll through. Now it's time to go to our last speed talk of the day, which is from Lindsey Higgins, who's going to be putting out a call for experts to join the work that she is doing at Pivotal.
All right, thank you so much, Alex, for inviting me here to speak with everyone today. So yes, hi, my name is Lindsey, and I am the scientific community lead at Pivotal, and we are building a global community of ecological experts. So very generally, Pivotal is a global monitoring and data analytics provider, and what we're working with is biodiversity and nature data to look at ecosystem condition. And we're trying to make large-scale nature monitoring both affordable and trustworthy. And this is really so we can give businesses and markets the data that they need about ecosystem condition to invest in more positive outcomes for nature rather than just being purely extractive. So we're working with customers to understand, what kind of data do they need, and then our science team combines this with dozens of other factors to design a sampling plan, and then either by ourselves, by field technicians, or even local land stewards, we go out into the field and collect data using drones, cameras, audio moths, camera traps, and the data that we collect is then processed by our machine learning algorithms and verified by this global community of ecological experts. And this is so we can really accelerate and quality assure the data analysis from everything that we've collected. Working with experts is also a great way for us to improve our own methods and also our machine learning models themselves. So right now we have, I think we just hit 2,100 people who've signed up to be a part of this expert network from all over the world. And they're helping our team translate this data into insights and analytics that are really easy to understand by these companies and ready-made for their disclosure and reporting requirements. So the experts that work with us perform annotation tasks on audio recordings and images. So from images, we're talking about mammals, plants, and trees. And then from audio recordings, birds, frogs, and bats. Everything with the exception of bats, all these annotations are performed inside the Pivotal platform that we're building. Bats are done using a software called Kaleidoscope that many bat experts are already familiar with. And the network itself, it's made up of researchers, students, even hobbyists, some field guides. There's no hard requirements on education level or training courses. The only stipulation that we have is that all of our experts need to pass a trial to verify their expertise within the particular species group and area that we'll be working in. So there are 4 steps if you're interested in working with us. The first is simply to register your interest. You fill in the registration form, you note which species groups and countries you're interested in working with, and then we keep that in our records until a trial becomes available. So right now, for example, we're working in Brazil. So we've been sending out trials and annotation exercises for South Brazil and soon the Pantanal. But as soon as a trial becomes available for a study that we have upcoming or currently ongoing, we will be in touch to send that your way. And then if you pass the trial, we agree on a rate, an hourly rate, and then you'll sign a consulting agreement with us. Finally, you can start receiving paid assignments. For every trial that you pass, you can receive assignments for those species groups and regions. And we encourage all of our experts to train for other areas of the world. So for example, we have some European bat experts who've also learned species in Japan to be able to work with those as well. And some of our experts also work with our science team on R&D projects. But I really see there being 3 key reasons why you might want to work with us. The first is that you get to make a difference. Like I mentioned, we're making it possible for businesses to ensure that what they do is good for nature. So we're showing them that it makes sense to their bottom line to contribute to positive nature outcomes. Reason number 2 is you get to advance the science. You're contributing to real world data sets, and we are building the fastest growing data set of annotated species level biodiversity data that's ever been compiled. And finally, you get to earn some extra income. All of our experts are paid for the time that they spend working for us once they've passed a trial. So if I have piqued your interest, you can sign up today with Talent Desk. That's the platform that we use to manage our assignments and time reporting. I'll throw this link into the chat as well, but I thought I would include it here with a QR code in case anyone wants to grab a picture of that. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I've put my email address here if anyone has any questions or wants to learn more about what we're doing. But that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It looked like somebody in the chat wanted that link, so thank you for putting it up there preemptively. Are you able to give us like any hints about any upcoming projects or like species areas or ecosystems that you guys are gonna be like needing people for soon?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm still recruiting for Brazil. Soon we will have work in Congo and potentially Uganda. I do think that's happening. I'm just not quite sure when. So, but I mean, we work all over the world. We've had ongoing projects in Portugal, the US, the UK. We have one right now in Sweden and France. So the idea is that we'll revisit these sites, on a yearly basis. So if like you pass the test for Sweden and you're working with us right now, in a year there's likely to be more work for you to perform there as well. So all
It looks
groups, all areas are welcome.
amazing. It looks like there's a question from Marconi. Do you want to go ahead and ask that?
Yeah, thank you. Amazing initiative, Lindsay. I just have like two quick questions. One is if you're somehow dealing with the differences on the expert in terms of validation, like if there is any way that you're taking that into account, like statistically, to understand if there is any differences on the validation expertise. And also just curious to also hear from you if you are planning to, or you guys have planning to share this amazing data set that you're collecting, like the annotated data set, if that will be available for the community at some point.
On your first question, it's something that we're kind of always paying attention to because we need to very early on understand, okay, how many experts are we going to need to recruit for Congo, for instance, and how many are likely to sort of not pass a trial based on ones that we've issued in the past. So yeah, those are things that we're thinking about and monitoring and always trying to find better ways to keep all of our experts in the loop because we want people also to be able to retest if they've studied up and things like that. So no, it's a good question. On the second part, it's a bit trickier because a lot of the data it belongs to the companies who hire us to collect it. So it's kind of, are they willing to open up that data to the world? And I mean, I hope so. I'm a big proponent of information sharing. I think it's super important, especially in an area like this. So it's something that we'll have to keep revisiting with customers moving forward. But yeah, that's kind of the best answer I can give right now.
You. It looks like there's another person with their hand up, but we got to move on to keep on schedule. So feel free to put that question in the chat. It looks like there are many questions for Carolina and some also for Lindsay in there. So go at it. Go crazy in the chat. And we are going to move on to our, if I can get my screen shared, to our outbreak section of Variety Hour. Really just a chance. It's less about ads and more of a chance for the WILDLABS team to tell you about stuff that we've got going on. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Adrian to share two exciting updates about the International Conservation Technology Conference that we've got happening in February.
Oh, cool. I was worried that I was to bring the slide, and you did it, of course, because you prepared everything. So, hi everyone. Nice to see you all here. We are very excited to advance on the conference that will be happening in February 2026 in Lima, Peru, and to invite you to submit sessions to this conference, but also if you would like pre-conference workshop where you have the opportunity to gather a group of people and work around key topics. So the deadline for this call for session and pre-conference workshop is the 15th of November, and we'll be very, very happy to read all this submission.
Thank you for that. And tangentially, we've got another conference update launched today.
We have, and I'm sure we'll have other during the next variety hour. Today we just launched the call for exhibitors, and we'll have a space for which we call the Innovation Export Discovery Zone. How you choose the name you prefer, but it will be a space for people to showcase their amazing work. Whether you are an innovator that want to showcase a technology, whether you are a conservation NGO that want to interact with the audience and the 750 people that will be likely there. You will have a space for doing so, but to do so, we have 30 booths. So there are limited slots available, and therefore we invite you to submit an application up to the 1st of December.
Thank you so much. Very exciting. And if you want to learn more about the conference, you can go to ICTC 2026.com.
Yep.
Talia's got it. That has all the information about all of this, registering interest, everything like that. Thank you, Adrian.
And please don't hesitate to contact us directly if you have other questions too.
Yes. But we have an email address for any conference-related questions, which is conference@wildlabs.net. Amazing. Thank you so much. And in the spirit of events that are happening, we actually have 2 WildLabs community events happening next week. Catherine Breen, one of the geospatial group leaders, is organizing a meetup for people using geospatial technologies or just conservation tech in general in Washington, D.C. on November 5th from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everyone, like I said, is invited, whether you're working in geospatial or not. And if there are any federal employees who are infected by the government shutdown in the United States, there are going to be discounts that the venue is offering, which is kind of nice consolation, I guess. And I'm going to send the link in the chat to register for that. And in addition, our edge computing group leaders, Jenna Klein and Yusuf Bayouli, are having a virtual meetup for people working in edge computing and edge AI on November 4th at 11 a.m. It's going to be a casual sort of meet and greet conversation to talk about your work, challenges, ideas that you have, and I will send the link in the chat as well for anybody who's interested in registering for that. Additionally, we have been trying something new. We're making AdBreak a little bit more for a place for the community to share any actionable updates or announcements like open positions or call for submissions or new conferences or whatnot. So when you registered, you should have seen a place to propose any announcements. I don't know if David Guerin is in the chat, but he had something to share about the Global Conservation Tech and Drone Forum happening in Kenya in 2026. If he isn't here to write about it in the chat, I will find that information and put it in for you. But if you have anything coming up in, I guess, December that you want to share during the November Variety Hour, please make sure to note that in your registration. Now it is time for one of the most contested parts of Variety Hour, which is the quiz. Today's quiz, in the spirit of Pen's long talk on open source technology, the screen is very bright, is about open source technology specifically relating to the inventory, which is WildLabs' sort of wiki-style database of conservation tech tools and projects and organizations. So all of the answers to these questions are found on the inventory, and I'll have links to all of the pages on each of these slides. I don't know how hard or easy this is going to be, so we'll just see how it goes. So question 1. What is a free open source tool for visualizing elevation data that uses path rendering to provide realistic and effective lighting? Is it A, Aerialot, B, Altitus, C, Aerialoon, or D, Elevite? A lot of these I feel like are going to be guessing, which is kind of fun, rather than questions where everyone knows the answer and it doesn't have any spirit to it. B, question mark, D, question mark, question mark. D, B. It's anyone's guess. But nobody's guessing A or C. Everyone's guessing B or D, and the answer is A, Areolot. And you can see the QR code and the inventory page for it. So feel free to look that up on the inventory and learn more about that product. It is tagged as open source, but I didn't do the full open source verification that I'm sure Penn will talk about during their long talk. But that's the answer to this first one. Question 2. What is CoralNet? Is it an automated coral reef image annotation software or a coral reef audio sound library? Someone said B very definitively. Someone said A, question mark. Adrian's saying, it looks like he's screaming, but I think he's saying A. But it looks like he's saying, ah. All right, a lot of people are saying A now. Adrian is screaming. He wants everyone to know. And the answer is A, an automated coral reef image annotation. And once again, you can learn more about CoralNet by visiting the page on the inventory here. And I encourage anybody who's maybe used CoralNet in the past to leave a review, because we always like to hear reviews from our community about the tech that they're using to help other people make more informed decisions when they're choosing what to use. Question 3. What tool can you use to map and value the goods and services from nature that sustain and fulfill human life? Is it ValueTrack, Provest, Goods Mapper, or Invest? I'm stumping everyone, and I feel bad about it. Josh says that D sounds way too hard to Google, and that is a fair point. But you better tell that to the people who made it, because the answer is Invest. The Invest stands for Integrated Valuation of Ecosystem Services and Trade-offs. And actually, this does have a review on it from Elsa, one of our other geospatial group leaders. So if anybody else has used Invest, feel free, or is curious about learning about it, feel free to visit the inventory page. Coming up with fake names for things was really fun, part of making this quiz. Question 4. What does I don't know if you're supposed to say the plus, Red AI do? Measure mangrove growth and health, quantify and map tropical forest degradation globally, automatically detect invasive plant species and images, or model natural disaster impact and resilience? You don't get a lot from the name. There are no clues here. But a lot of people are saying B. So maybe there is a clue that I don't know about. B for sure, says Paul. Well, he was right. It's B. Red AI is a software that helps quantify and map tropical forest degradation globally. Okay, here the clue is knowing about them. That's so fair. Red Plus gives a good hint. Well, someone needs to clue me in on how that's a good hint. I'd love to learn more after in the after hours. And our last question for the quiz today is, how many open source camera trap related tools are currently listed on the inventory? If you were to go and do it right now, it wouldn't be the right answer, because there are some things that are labeled open source but are also not free, which I don't know if that makes them not open source. It's a good question for Penn in the next talk. People are saying C. People are saying B. Everyone's saying everything except D, which is the answer. 11. So if you want to see more open source camera trap related projects in the inventory and you know about them, go ahead and add them to the inventory. Lower than I thought too, Talia. So we need everyone to get on there and add what they know about. And I can send a link to the inventory after I stop sharing my screen. Thank you as always for playing. This one was a sort of difficult to make, and I think difficult for everyone to play. And that's how the quiz goes. So with that, it brings us to the final section of Variety Hour, which is our long talk. So I am going to hand it over to Penn, who's going to sort of, as I alluded to, give us an orientation on all things open source technology for conservation. Take it away, Pen.
Right. Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's great to see all of you. I'm very lucky to be working with Shannon and Bree as part of the WildLabs Open Source Solutions group. So I've done some ecology and conservation research in the past, but my projects over the past few years have been about how to do open science and incorporating open source technologies into science, including conservation science. And when I talk about this, I always start with the way I think about the difference between doing science versus alchemy. And this comes from a quote I really like from a very famous science fiction author called Cory Doctorow, who said that if you look at what alchemists used to do, superficially, they were running experiments, they were taking notes, and they were learning from the experiments that they did. But they kept what they knew a secret from each other for hundreds of years. And because of that, they didn't advance the state of the art very much. And every single alchemist had to learn in the hardest possible way that drinking mercury is a bad idea. And I think this really says a lot about the core of what sets science apart from doing alchemy. Because when we do science, including conservation science, we're building what we do on knowledge that came before us, and we have a responsibility to the scientific process to continue to share what we're learning with people that come after us. And it is very much the spirit that brought me to open source technologies. So if you look into open source software and hardware, there are formal industry standard definitions for software that's developed by the Open Source Initiative, and also for open source hardware, which is maintained by the Open Source Hardware Association. Now, those definitions are pretty long, but they basically boil down to the fact that all open source technologies have to come with 4 fundamental freedoms for the users of that technology to use it, study how it works, modify and remix it, and continue to share the underlying source code or designs with other people without any restrictions, right? And Alex was alluding to some cool projects on the WildLabs inventory. And one piece of software I always like to talk about that I think is a fun example is the Q Greenland project. So this started as a collaboration between different scientists, whether it's people working in conservation or geology or climatology, with the commonality being that their work happens in Greenland. And they want to develop a common geospatial data platform. So they started with the open source QGIS software for geographic information systems. And they put in geospatial data about Greenland and a lot of the tools for analyzing that data all into one package built on top of QGIS. Now, back in 2023, they wanted to run a workshop to teach people how to use this entire package. But they discovered that it was really hard, right? Because in a room with 20 students, they had to set up QGIS and QGreenland on 20 different computers with different configurations. And that was very time consuming. So they went to Jupyter instead. So Jupyter is a computational notebook, usually used for writing code in Python for doing data analysis. But they built on top of that, so it actually runs a complete Linux desktop environment, which is an open source operating system, in which they installed QGIS and then they put the QGreenland geospatial platform on top of all of that. And they wrapped all of this into one package that you can open in your web browser, so that all of the students in the workshop, they get the same experience to learn how to use QGreenland. And this was only possible because all of the underlying components are completely open source with those freedoms that I told you about, so that they can freely remix those components into this particular package to use in their geospatial workshops. So I think this is a really cool software example. And some of the work I've been doing have been on the hardware side of things. And if you really think about it, hardware forms the physical layer of science. And we rely on that to do so much of the work, that we do. In fact, it was physical hardware that took people to the moon. And when we go out into the field, we also bring a lot of hardware with us. There are a lot of interesting projects here. There's OpenCDD, which I really love, which was started by uh, by a friend of mine for measuring conductivity, temperature, and depth in a lot of marine applications. I work with Bree, and Bree works with a whole team on the Mothbox project, which a lot of you might have seen on Well Labs, which is a mobile insect monitoring platform that's completely open source. But the example I want to go into a little more today is the Open Flexure Microscope project. So this project was started in the UK. I know some of the founders of this project. They're amazing people. And for those of you who have used microscopes before, you'll know that it's dominated by a handful of manufacturers in the world, like Leica or Nikon. And they sell very expensive microscopes, but microscopes are so important to so much scientific work, right? And what sets Open Flexure apart is that it is completely open source, where if you go to their website, they give you the complete schematics and design files for building the Open Flexure microscope, plus complete build instructions that kind of look like, those IKEA furniture assembly manuals, if you've seen those things. But it teaches you how to build this microscope on your own. And it is a research grade microscope. So it does the traditional things such as bright field imaging, in this case, looking at stained blood smears, or fluorescence imaging, right, which is another common application. But because it is completely open source, there's actually a different research group on, on the opposite side of the world, who took the Open Flexure design and improved it to increase its resolution for fluorescence imaging, to achieve things that weren't possible before. And I think that's also really cool. But what's also really important about open source technologies is that because of that reduction in the cost for locking down your designs, it actually makes it a lot cheaper for other people to build. So if you go out and gather the material you need to build the Open Flexure microscope, putting all of it together, the total cost starts at just $200. So if you've bought a lab grade microscope before, you'll know that this is sometimes an order of magnitude cheaper than the microscopes you usually buy for the same performance, which I think is just absolutely mind-blowing. Now, this actually led to some environmental applications. There's the Endoscope project, which learned from the Open Flexure design to develop a visualization system for analyzing marine plastic pollution. And I think that's another cool example of remixing that happens in open source technologies. But I want to touch on why I think open source tech is particularly important for conservation work. So just recently, I was at the London Natural History Museum, and at the end of one of their exhibits, they had a sign up. And within the sign, they were acknowledging that their collections were collected within the context of empire, colonialism, and exploration. And this is very much true for ecology and conservation research as well, where we have to confront the imperial history of ecology and conservation science. I hope and think this is something we can all agree on. And my message here today is that technology plays a very important role in this imperial legacy. There's a lot of talk about the problems with closed source technologies. First of all, if we do science with it, it's fundamentally not reproducible. There's a lot of vendor lock-in, forced obsolescence that creates a lot of e-waste, for example. And because of this monopolizing practices, it leads to very high costs. And all of this put together makes the fact that closed source technology reinforces a lot of global inequities. I personally know conservation scientists in the global majority who are in the countries that they live in. They might need a particular piece of equipment for the conservation work they want to do, but the vendor and manufacturer doesn't even sell it in their countries. And if they can somehow get access to it, they cannot afford it. And if they can somehow scrunch together the money to buy it, once they finally get it, they're not even allowed to maintain or adapt that piece of equipment for their local needs. And it just becomes prohibitively difficult for researchers all across the world to have access and be able to build on the technology to do the conservation in the right places. So I think when it comes to the social impact of technologies, it's really important to be mindful of a lot of the global inequalities that come with them. because technology is not neutral. Technology is a projection of power, and closed source technologies come with the risk of perpetuating the systems of oppression that still exist in so much of the science that goes on today. So I think we have a responsibility to make use of open source technologies. And going back to the open fluctuator example, this they were able to adapt it for malaria diagnosis. And there are researchers in sub-Saharan African countries who are able to locally produce and maintain open fluctuator microscopes and gain access to them in ways that they weren't able to before. And because open fluctuator is open source, another cool thing is that it actually creates commercial opportunities for local small businesses to locally manufacture and provide support to the open fluctuator microscope in ways that are relevant and useful for local researchers. So this comes to a point that Alex was mentioning earlier, which is a common misconception that open source technologies have to be non-commercial or only done for free. But the answer is no, because if you look at those four fundamental freedoms that I talk about as foundational to the definition of open source software and hardware, you will see that it doesn't say anything about, whether you can sell it or make money from it or not, as long as you ensure these freedoms for users of those technologies. And if you look at examples of projects that are very well known in WILDLABS, for example, there's the FieldKit project that produces completely open source environmental sensors. Both the hardware and the software stack are completely open source, but they also sell complete kits to people as a revenue stream for their business, right? And this has become a very successful example. And FieldKit, is a pretty big deal right now. There's also the Aribada initiative, which provides paid consulting services to design and produce customized open source technologies for specific conservation applications. So these are just a couple of examples that show how, making money and open source technologies can actually work together to achieve positive conservation outcomes. So there are a lot of other things I can go into that I'm happy to do so later today, or as part of the open source conservation solutions group in WILDLABS. But I'll just end by saying that open source technologies really enable inclusive and equitable solutions to so many of the urgent crises that we face today, whether that's climate change or species extinction. And at the end of the day, we simply don't have the time to be alchemists. We cannot afford to not open source the work that we do. And with that, I just want to thank Alex for inviting me here today. And thank you for your time. In the spirit of what I just talked about, I've published the editable slides for this talk to Zenodo that you can remix. And I'm happy to answer your questions and continue the conversation. So thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much, Pen. And thank you for publishing that for everybody to see it. If people have questions for Pen, nice. You probably beat me to what some of my questions were, but I'm still going to ask them anyway. Like if somebody doesn't know anything about open source technology and wants to like transition to using more of those types of tools and hardware, software, or even just like get familiar with the space, like what is your like step one like direction to those people?
Are you talking about people who want to use it or actually make it?
Yes, both.
Both. Both. Yeah. So when it comes to using those technologies, obviously one place to start it would be, the WILDLABS inventory, because a lot of the projects in there at least are labeled as open source. Now, like I mentioned, there is an industry standard for generally what it means, so you can check it against those definitions. And when it comes to making open source tools, again, the general principle is that when you've created a piece of software or a piece of hardware, when you share it, you publish the underlying source code and the schematics and the design files using open source licenses. There's a few steps to that I'm happy to go into, but the point is that you share what you've created with other people in a reproducible way. And and share them with explicit, permissions for other people to make use of what you're sharing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I know there are some discussions and maybe like frustrations in the open source community of like open source washing, like or like companies that say that things are open source but they actually aren't. Is there any like guidance you can give on making sure and helping people like navigate those types of situations of verifying what is really open and what isn't?
Yes, so it is called open washing. For instance, there are sometimes people who buy a software package for what they want to do, and then they realize that it comes with a lot of restrictions. For example, it says, oh, you're not allowed to make a derivative work that creates a competing product, for example. But if you look at those four fundamental freedoms I mentioned, it violates the fact that you shouldn't be restricted in what you do with a piece of open source technology. So I think this boils down to the fact that it is important for us to develop this common language of exactly what open source means. Because once we have a specific meaning in this shared language, then we can apply that to look at whether a piece of technology is open source. And if it isn't, then we can say why it doesn't meet that definition, if that makes sense.
Yes. I remember, I think probably about a year ago, you made a post on Wild Labs about like sort of using like veganism as a metaphor for open source solutions and that it has meaning and the meaning is important and that specific things make something not vegan in the same way that it does for open source solutions. And I think actually the Wild Labs website is maybe down right now. So if you're trying to click on any of those
Ah,
links that we sent and it's not working, you're not alone. We're working on that in the back end. But hopefully the website will get back up soon, and I'd love to share that post in the chat because it did a lot of good for me for understanding sort of the importance of it of having these clear-cut definitions.
mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for reminding me of that. So I'm happy to share that again as well, once the website is working.
Bummer, we sent all these links about about the conference and the website crashed, which maybe means that we're getting so much interest that it just couldn't handle it. Anybody else have any questions for Penn? We have a little bit of time left, so we could probably do some live questions answering now, or for any of the other speakers, perhaps. All right, I won't hold you all hostage. Well then with that, I don't think we've ever ended early before. So this might be a record. Maybe I did too good of a job of keeping us on track. Well, so again, thank you to all of our speakers for these lovely presentations. I'm going to end the recording now, but everybody is invited to stick around for what we call after hours, which is an unrecorded place to hang out, to talk, where you can have a more casual conversation about some of the topics that we heard about today or really anything else. So thank you all so much for coming, and we will see you at the next and last Variety Hour of 2025, which will be on November 26th. Thank you so much for coming.